Yep. Good evening, everyone. So, yesterday we learned about data binding, how data binding works. We discussed about one-way and two-way binding. In this context, I explained a small scenario that is how events work, right? So, what are synthetic events? In React interviews, one question is regularly asked: what are synthetic events? Synthetic events, it is a library of virtual DOM events. So React cannot use direct DOM events because all events are related to DOM. React cannot directly use those events. So which library it uses? It uses a library called synthetic events, right? And I hope you remembered event arguments. So two event arguments will be their default, but React have one event argument, right? So, and how we can access object properties and how we can access event. These are the basic things we learned. Now, once you know this, we will see another concept. In React today, we will see other simple points are there. You need to know style binding. We need to know the concept of style binding. Style binding is nothing but, so it is the process of binding inline styles for elements in virtual DOM. It is the process of binding inline styles for elements in virtual DOM. Actually, why you need to learn this? Because generally how to apply inline styles in HTML, CSS, while working with HTML, CSS, generally styles are applied like this. This is the syntax of in HTML. Generally in HTML, the styles are defined. You have a div. We can apply style is equal to some background color and some color as some white. Like this, we apply the styles in HTML. Because HTML is using the actual DOM, the styles are defined like this. This is not suitable for React. In React, if you want to apply styles to any element, you cannot use this technique. So you need to change a little bit. What you have to do is, so in JSX, because React is using JSX, in JSX, inline styles are defined. Inline styles are defined by using style attribute. We have to use a style attribute. That is okay. And the styles, style attribute names or CSS attribute names are defined in camel case. So that means if you want to apply styles for React elements in JSX, we cannot follow the same way how we follow in our general HTML. We have to use this JSX syntax. What is meant by camel case is nothing but actually. So here syntax like this, JSX virtual DOM. Here div, we need to write style and we need a dynamic. In that dynamic, again a block. In this block, we need to define background hyphen background color like this. And what is the value? Red. That is how we need to write. And comma. So color is what? White. You have to write like a object. This is how we need to define. That means actually what is the attribute name in CSS? The attribute name in CSS is background hyphen color, but that is not suitable here. So wherever any attribute is there with hyphen, it should separate with camel case. It should be defined in camel case. That means you have to write in camel case like this. Suppose we are having font size. This should be written like this, font size. We have font weight. We have to write, this is actually font weight. We should write like this, font what? Weight. Suppose we have text align. We have left, center, right. That you have to write text align. Like this we have to use. This is camel case. Suppose there is color. You should just write color. That camel case is only when the words are separated with a hyphen, right? So in general CSS, the attribute names are these. And in React, you cannot write like that. In React, you have to write in camel case. So whenever you want to apply the styles, then you can define this. Right now, see what we will do here. I'm writing dynamically inline styles. Suppose we want to apply some styles. Suppose I want to apply some border background color for that heading. Then what we will do? Let's go and see here there is heading. For heading, we have to write style. I am writing style and I am writing here in the quotes background hyphen color. So that is like red. This is not valid. That means you cannot write the styles in this way. That's not the good way of writing the styles in React. Actually, it is inline style. And here, when you apply that, the styles are defined there. We are trying to apply inline style. That's how generally in HTML we write the style. Let's load this and see. It shows an error. Now you can see it says JSX is not expecting this type of value. So immediately you will see an error. So you cannot write inline styles in the same way how you used to write in your general HTML. Then how do we write the styles? So obviously it is an error. You cannot write like this. First, what you have to do, you need to put a binding expression. In that binding expression, again, you have to write a block. In that block is an object type. In that object, attribute background color. Like this, we have to define background color. Like this, we need to use. So and colon. So the value is suppose red because it's a string type. And no semicolon. We have to use comma because it is an object. and we have some color as some white. Like this, we need to apply. This is the right way of applying the styles. So when you are defining inline styles we cannot bind directly as we bind in HTML. You have to change your syntax like this. Now, what is the advantage of binding these styles? Means why to bind the styles dynamically? Why to bind the styles dynamically? Because the element can change its appearance according to situation. Element may not have same appearance every time. Element can change its appearance dynamically. For example, you are using a text box. If text box is using some validation and that validation fails, then it will show red color. If it pass, then it will display in green. That means a text box must able to change its effects, its style dynamically. What is the meaning of style binding? Is not just applying styles, changing the styles according to situation. Styles can change according to the situation. That's what actually the concept of style binding. Standard styles, same, just like this. I will give this example I given for heading. For the heading, this is the example I given. Same I given above also, right? Now, what is the main concept is, so what style binding does is, style binding allows to change the element style dynamically. So that means you can customize the appearance of element according to state and situation. According to state and situation. You can customize the appearance of element according to state and situation. That is the main concept of style binding. Let's do one example. First, concept wise, one syntax we are watching. Remember, we are first learning the concepts. Once we are aware of all the concepts, we will use all these concepts and build one application. Still, we are not building any application, right? Because you are not yet ready to build. To build an application, start designing a real-time example, you must first know all these basic things. Then only you are ready for building an application. So if you know data binding, if you know style binding, if you know class binding, then you are ready. Many times people ask like, shall we try all these in a real-time example? We will try, we will see that. But you are still not ready for that. For that, you need to know some more concepts. Then we can design some real world examples, which I will show you, right? So let's see one example how the style can change for any element dynamically, right? Let's see that. Here, I will clean up all this and I will just keep one simple content for you. And all this logic also not required. Yeah. So this is a simple concept. Yeah, simple one. Here I will keep a heading, some register user, and we will keep a data list and a text box, user name, and we have a data definition. And here we are having some text box, input type is equal to text. Okay, now we want to apply some effects to this text box. That means what we want is, if text box is having any value, then it will be green. If it is not having a value, we will keep it red. That means I will put a placeholder. So placeholder says that name required. That is just one simple screen design we created. User should enter some name into it. So when entered some name, it should be green in color. If removed, there is nothing, then it should be red in color. That means now the text box must able to change itself. Its appearance should change. Then how you can change that? How you can apply? Now there are two ways. Is this the appearance you want to give for several elements? Or is this the appearance only for this element? If only for this element, then you can use style binding. If several elements have to use the same style, then better use class. Why? Because you know already inline styles, embedded styles, and you know the difference. Inline style means you are applying for one element, they will work only for that element. Right? When you keep embedded CSS, you can reuse them across elements, right? So here, how to verify whether a value entered or not? How to verify whether a value entered or not? You know that you need one function that is handle name change. And it should collect an event argument E. Yesterday we learned all this. Now this have to use on change. On change, what is it? Handle name change. Okay. Now we will create a state constant. We will put here one style. We will say validation style. That is a simple validation style, and set validation style. Set validation style, it is using use state, and actually it is an object, because you know that every style that you apply inline is an object. So here now, every style that you apply is an object. That object contains key and value. The keys are in camel case, and the values according to their type, string, number, or anything we can configure. So what is the point now? Every style is an object. So this is an object. In this object, what you want to give? In this object, I want to give border. Okay. Border, I will give initially 0 pixels. Okay. Initially 0 pixel, nothing is there. Next, second point, that means comma. Next, what? I want to apply some box shadow. Box shadow. Box shadow 0 pixel, 0 pixel, 0 pixel, and red color. Right? This is not, this is red color. This is here color name actually. We need to give. That means this is the default values. That means object contains two values. So you can give like that. That is just I am showing you that these values they contain. Because they are string type, you can just leave it empty string, because values you can apply later. That means border is an empty and shadow is also empty. Box shadow is empty. Okay. Now what we need to do, this is an object. Now when name changes, so here we will write a simple condition. If e dot target dot value, target dot value means text box value. Text box value is equal to empty. That means there is nothing inside. If it is empty, then set validation style. Set validation style is a method because it is a setter. And what is the value type we have to set? Object. Then curly brace, it's an object. In that, what properties are there? Two properties are there. One is what? Border. Border we will give 2 pixel solid red, comma. Another one, box shadow. Box shadow we will give 2 pixel, 2 pixel, 2 pixel red. Like this we are giving. You know generally how to give shadows, what are the values for shadows and all. These are the values: horizontal, vertical, blur, and color. That is shadow. Okay, if it is not empty, else. If it is not empty, what we are doing? Set validation style. This object, we have border. This time border will be 2 pixel solid green color. That means if it is not empty, if there is some value inside. And what we will do? So we will give box shadow, another one. It is 2 pixel, 2 pixel, and 2 pixel, which color? Green. This is the style we need to apply. Now, very important, the style is present. The style is present in which object? The style is present in which object? The style is present in validation style object. That means whatever styles are there, they are present in this object. Now we need to apply this for this text box. That means text box will use style, and the style comes from which object? The object name. Object name is validation style. That's it. That means now the validation style is not standard. The validation style is changing according to the situation. So we are binding inline styles here. Now you see what happens is when you open this and I click inside, I start typing, it is in green color. You can see it is green color. And I remove that. That means I remove, and you can see this is in red color. So if there is some value, then it is in green. If there is no value, then it is in red. That means we can change the appearance dynamically. I am not teaching you validation. Validation later. It's a big concept. I am just teaching you how to apply the styles and change the styles dynamically. How we can change the appearance of any element dynamically. Actually, not just showing the appearance, you can add a lot of things. Like we can display a message saying that please enter name, right? So these all in validations you will see. Our current concept is to understand how we can apply styles for any element in React. When you want to apply inline styles, then you have to use a style binding technique. Style binding technique. So in style binding technique, this is the process how you define. So I will give this example. This example is data binding dot JSX. In this, I will copy this logic. Here we are defining that style. This is one simple option. In this example, I will just explain overview what we done. There is an object. What is that object name? Validation style. How you say that it is an object? Its data type is defined as object. In that object, two properties are there. Those are actually style properties. What is border? Another one is box shadow. Now, whenever user is entering some name in the text box, we will verify whether there is a value or not. If there is no value, then we will set the style to red color. And if there is a value, we will set the style to green color. And this colors effects are stored in a reference of validation style. This validation style we will apply to this style. right? This is the technique of defining inline styles, how you configure and define the inline styles, right? So if you want to write the styles, always follow the technique of camel case object representation. Dynamically, if you want to change through an object, you can change according to the situation, they can change, right? This is the concept of style binding, how we can manage style binding. But if there are a lot of styles you want to apply, then better you can use class binding. If you want to reuse them, that means you want to access from some other location and use, then we have to use class binding. Class binding is nothing but we can apply a CSS class, right? How do we apply CSS class? This is style binding. Let's see another option, how the class binding works. Class binding. So it is the process of binding a CSS class to to virtual DOM elements. It is the process of binding a CSS class to virtual DOM elements. So you can bind and change the class by using class name property. I have to use class name property. Already we learned that. I already told you how to apply the classes. If your styles are so many styles to apply, then generally what developers do, they keep all the styles under one class name and they apply that class. Instead of writing all the styles, you can just apply by using class. Currently in our project, we installed Bootstrap. When we installed Bootstrap, so you can directly use Bootstrap classes also. You can apply those Bootstrap classes. I will show you here. See, actually, class binding, I will give you a simple syntax. Generally, you have a div and class name is equal to, and you can define like this. Dynamically, you can define CSS class name. You can use any CSS class name. This is how we bind the CSS classes. So dynamically changing the classes also important. Let's do one simple example for this. Already we applied so many. All these days I showed you already. Here you see class name container fluid. This is nothing but class binding. You are binding a CSS class. But what is the concept of binding is not just applying, but able to change. According to the situation, the class should change. If you can change style, you can change the class also. Inline styles, you can change. Classes also, you can change. How do we change the class? Let's see. Suppose I am designing a simple screen now. Let's keep a div. In that, we will create a form. In the form, I am defining a data list, a heading, register user, and data term, some username. So input type is text. And we have a simple class name form control. And we have password. We are creating a simple HTML form. Input type is password. And the class name is form control. These are general CSS classes. We have a button and a class name btn and btn suppose dark, and we have some register something, and for this div we are giving style, some more options: deflex, justify content center, align items center, and I will write a style. You know, style is defined height. Height, just now we learned height some 500 pixel. You can see this is a simple login screen that we created. A simple register screen we created. And here I will give W100. That is a simple screen we have. Now what I will do is here for the text box, just add here one more. We will put a input type is equal to checkbox. We will add a checkbox here. This checkbox have a container div. Okay. In this checkbox, I am giving dark theme. Just I am giving the text dark theme. And what we will do is for that checkbox, I will give a modern look for the checkbox. We have form switch. And for checkbox, we have class called form check input. This makes the checkbox look like this. This is checkbox. This is the Bootstrap checkboxes. You know, Bootstrap from latest version 5, it supports checkbox like this. This is a different appearance for checkbox. For that, we have to use the class form switch, and we use form check input. That becomes that, right? Actually, now what I want here is when this checkbox is checked, when the checkbox is checked, I want this entire form to turn into dark theme, black. Entire form should change to dark theme. So we want to apply so many effects now. We want to change the background color. We want to set the foreground color. We want to change. Then what we will do? Simple here. We need to verify whether checkbox is checked or not. Based on that, we need to apply some class. Then what we will do here? So we will declare this logic is not required anymore. Remove. Okay. Because this is a different example, we are creating constant theme, and a set theme is equal to use state, and the theme is a string type because classes are string. Class names are string type. Styles are object type. So class names are simple string type. So we defined a string. It's an empty string. Theme name is empty. Okay. Now we will write a function. The function is handle theme change. And we will pass event argument E. When it should fire up? When user is changing the checkbox. That means what we have to do? We have to just use on change. Which one? Handle theme change. Handle theme change. Now how to verify is the checkbox checked or not? Then we have to use a condition if e dot target dot which one? Checked. If it is selected. Checked by default return true if it is checked. You don't need to use equal to true, right? Because by default checked is true, right? If it is checked, what should happen? Set theme. We will apply some class names. What are the class names is I am giving bg dark, bg dark, bg dark, and I will give text white. I will give padding 4, padding 3 or 4 I am giving. These are the classes we are applying. BG dark, text white, padding 4. These are all classes. These are the classes we want to apply. Okay. If it is not checked, set theme should be empty. Nothing. We don't want to apply anything. Just we will keep it empty. Right. Okay. Now you see theme is a state value which contains string. Now this theme should be applied for this form. That means for the form, what we will do, we will apply class name. Class name is dynamically coming from theme. The class name is dynamically coming from theme. That means when a checkbox is checked, the theme is applied with these classes: BG dark, text white, and padding 4. Now you see what happens. If the checkbox is checked, it will change. The entire appearance is changed. Now I will turn off this dark theme, then it will be normal again. That means we are applying the classes dynamically. We are applying the classes dynamically and we are defining it. That is a simple dynamic appearance. You can change everything. Suppose I want to change button class. Currently we are changing only these. For everyone, you can have a different. You can even change a background photo, right? So that's your CSS now. Currently, I'm using Bootstrap classes. I'm using Bootstrap classes. Bootstrap, BG dark, text white. These are all Bootstrap classes. If you don't have Bootstrap, then write the classes by your own and you can apply those classes. For example, if there are no Bootstrap classes, let's see how. First, I will copy this example. This is an example. So that is data binding.jsx. Here we are using same. Now let's see if there is no Bootstrap classes, then how? That means I will do another work here. What we have to do is, if there are no Bootstrap classes, write your own classes. How to write? Let's create a CSS file. Already there is a JSX file. We will add a CSS file. What is it? Two-way binding dot what? CSS. In that CSS, I will give a class called dark theme. Dark theme is the class name. And what this class contains? Background color is what? Black. Color is what? White. Padding is what? Some 20 pixel. Like this we are giving. This is the class which contains all those effects. Now we need to use this class. Then first we have to import that CSS. So we have to import. What to import? Dot slash two-way binding dot what? CSS. We have to import that. When you import, now you can access the class. What is the class name? Dark theme. If it is checked, which one should apply? Dark theme class should apply. That means this is not a Bootstrap class now. This is our own class. We are creating one class and we are applying. That means now what will happen again here? When I refresh this and I select this, then it will be in dark theme. Same thing I have done. I can add more effects now. I remove, it will be normal. Suppose I will go to my CSS and say I given border radius as 30 pixel. So background color, I'm changing it to suppose some dark cyan, some color like this. And you can see dark theme. That means it will apply like this. That means you can change and you can configure. So that means if I define no, that means there is a light theme also. That means I will define light theme. So background color is light cyan like this. That is the color. And what should be color? Color should be black. And padding is 20 pixel. And same border radius is 20 pixel. Like this I am giving 30 pixel something. Now here in the condition, we have to apply which theme? Light theme. Like this we need to define. And what is the default value in the theme? We have to use what? Light theme. That is the default value. Default string. Default string is light theme. It will apply light. And we apply the dark theme, then it will be dark. That means we are changing the appearance like this. We are changing the appearance. So that is by using our own effects, our own classes. If there are bootstrap classes and you know them, you can simply apply those bootstrap classes, or you write your own classes and you bind those classes. That is how we can change the appearance dynamically. Here I will give this example I given. This is using bootstrap classes. By using bootstrap classes, we are applying. Another example here I will give. So using custom classes. Custom classes we can. Here we have to do one work. Data binding dot. This is two-way na. Suppose two-way binding dot what? CSS. In CSS first, you need to add these. All these you need to add. These are the styles we are defining. Then two-way binding dot JSX. In that same thing, by default, it will have a light theme and we can change. Right, that is the option. Actually, here the class name info is better. That means here I am giving, instead of BTN dark, I will give BTN info. BTN info, it looks like this actually. I'm just changing that effect and display. You can change the appearance of any element. That just you need to write the classes and bind the class. So what is difference between style binding and class binding? Style binding uses an object. That object contains set of styles which can change the appearance of element dynamically. But class binding contains a string. The string comprises of collection of CSS classes which you can dynamically change for any element. So here, so let me give you a clarification for that. That means here, so what is difference between style and class binding? So style binding requires a style object. So which is a JavaScript object. We can say JSON object, which is a JSON object with a set of attributes and values. Style binding requires this, a style object, which is a JSON object with set of attributes and values. So class binding requires a string which comprises of set of CSS class names. Set of CSS class names. So that is class binding. So syntactically, style binding contains an object with the attribute and value like this. And in class, it will contain class name. Here we define a string class 1 and class 2 and class 3, like that. All the classes are separated with space. All the classes are separated with space. Now don't get confused here. There is nothing confusion. What is this? Oh, first curly brace outside. That is binding expression. Data binding expression is done by using that curly brace. That means any dynamic value is binded by using block. Data binding expression. What is inside one? Inside one is an object. That means sometimes you people may think it is object in object. It is not object in object. It is only one object. The outside curly brace is binding expression to bind a dynamic value, right? Anywhere to bind the dynamic value, you need this. This is the example of style binding and class binding. How we can bind the styles, how we can bind the classes. So 3 points are there. So summary, we learned basic of data binding. We learned the basic of style binding, and we learned the basic of class binding. One more outline we learned about event binding. Event binding detailedly we will see again. That means all the events, how to use them. Basic event binding showed you. Right? In any front-end designs, these 4 techniques are very basic. Whether you may be learning Angular or React or Vue or any technology in the front end. So data binding, style binding, class binding, event bindings are very common things in every UI technology. Whether in future you are anywhere, you already learned jQuery, you know already JavaScript, everywhere these are common, right? So the front end designs dynamically they can change according to the state and situation by using style and class binding like concepts, right? That is it. So now we are aware of few things, how data binds. We are aware of two-way binding and one-way binding, in one direction, in two directions, how it works. We know how to apply the styles and classes dynamically, and we know some basic events, means how we can manage the event. Later, I will show you click and other events, how they are used, right? Initially, once we know this, one more important thing you should know now, means to start designing examples, you need to know as one important is function component life cycle hook. Function component life cycle hooks. You need to know function component life cycle hook. Only one is there actually. Actually, life cycle hook contains so many things which you will learn in class. Class is different, function is different. What is the meaning of function component lifecycle hook is nothing but whenever you design a component, currently we are learning what type of component function. We have 2 types of component, function components and class. Now, actually, lifecycle is nothing but it indicates the phases from start to end. A life cycle contains the phases from start to end. And in function component, so there are 2 phases, one start, another one end. At the time of loading the component, what activities to perform. And at the time of destroying the component, what are the activities to perform. That means remember, Every function component comprises of two phases. Every function component comprises of two phases in its life cycle. Every function component comprises of two phases in life cycle. Life cycle is nothing but life cycle. Life cycle specifies the start and end of component. It specifies the start and end of component. So every function component comprises of two phases in its life cycle. Actually, the two life cycle phases are: number one, we have mount and we have unmount. We have two phases. One is mount phase, another one is unmount. I'm talking about only function component. Class components different again. That means function component, we have two phases, mount and unmount. Mount means what? At the time of loading the component, what activities you want to perform. At the time of unloading the component, what activities to perform. Now the question is, when a component unloads, generally component loads when index is going to render. That means you saw in index, there is a method called render. What that render method is doing? That render method is rendering your component. That means you see currently what is our component name? Our component is two-way binding. What index.js is doing? Index.js is rendering in this component into the root element. That hierarchy already I showed you. What is that root element? What is that root element? That root element is a div inside index.html page. Inside index.html, there is a div which is referred as root. Into that root, it is rendering. It is rendering which component? Two-way binding. That means it is actually mounting the component. Component mounting means the component is loading. We will not use the word loading. We will use the word mount. That means a component mounts. Whenever render method executes, your component is mounted into the root element of index.html. That is called mounting phase. When a component will unmount, generally a component can unmount when you switch from one component to another. That means now you are moving from one component to another. You finished one component, you went to second component. Then previous component will unmount. Unmount means whatever memory allocated for that, it will be destroyed. Right? So mount means it is simply like loading your component. Unmount means it is unloading the component. Usually when a component mounts, when your index is rendering or when you requested a component, it will mount. How to request a component, you will learn. Later we will learn about conditional rendering like concept. There we will learn how to request any component. We can request a component, that component comes. Right? We can request any component, that component comes. That is called as mount. I will put a simple logic here to make you understand the concept, right? Let's see. For example, means how this process actually works, means how to define this mount and unmount. So what is the meaning of mount? So mount is a phase that triggers when the component is created, and it is loading into root element. It is a phase that triggers when the component is created and it is loading into root element. So component mount phase that triggers when the component is created and it is loading into root element. So unmount is a phase that triggers when you switch from one component to another. Unmount is a phase that triggers when you switch from one component to another. When you are changing from one component to another, the previous component will unmount and the next component will mount. The previous component is going to destroy and the new component will be mounted. These all we will see practically how they work, right? Practically, we will see how they are going to work. Now, actually, this question is, the point here is how these phases are managed. How these phases are managed. For example, I will tell you one simple reference, give you a simple reference. Suppose we have a class, right? In a class, I think you know, class means general OOP concept related classes, right? Object oriented programming class. You know, everybody that class have a constructor, right? Generally in JavaScript OOP languages, you might have learned JavaScript classes, any OOP language related classes, class have a constructor. What is the role of constructor? The role of constructor is instantiation. That means a constructor is used for creating an object for class. An object for class is created by using constructor. That means constructor is responsible for instantiation. That means creating object for class. At the time of creating an object for class, if you want any extra activity to perform, that you write in constructor. That means if you don't write a constructor in a class, is class having a constructor? If you don't write any constructor in a class, is there a constructor in class? I hope you all people know that every class have default constructor. Every class is having a default constructor. That means even you don't write a constructor, every class have a constructor. So internally, the constructor is going to do some activities. In addition to that, you want some more activities, then you have to manually write the constructor. In the same way, every component have a mount phase and unmount phase, which you may not see. You may not visually see mount and unmount, but every component is internally having it. That means every component internally have two phases. What are those? Mount and unmount. You may not see those phases, but it is having those phases. Now, at the time of mounting, already it is doing some work. If you want to do some more work, then you have to manually write. How to manually write mount phase? How to manually write unmount phase? That means how you will tell the activities to perform at the time of loading, at the time of unloading. Actually, for that, so React 18. So React 18 provides a function hook called use effects. A function hook called use effects, which is used to define mount and unmount phase for component. So this is a very popular interview question for people in experience levels. They ask that how you write the mount and unmount phases for any component. If it is a function component related mount and unmount is written by using a hook called useFX. By using a hook called useFX. That means useFX defines the actions to perform at the time of loading the component. And the same function provides the actions to perform at the time of unloading the component. That means the actions to perform at the time of loading and unloading is managed by whom? useFX. And remember, this is a function hook. It can work only in function components. For class components, there is another technique that you will learn while learning class components. So every function component can use this hook if it have to define certain activities to perform. For example, see what I am doing. I will give you the syntax and I will tell you what it is. How to write, suppose you have a function and you have component name. Generally, your function will have export and all. In this function, usually it returns some markup. Already we know this. It is returning some div. Right. Now, how to write the mount and unmount phase? You have to use a hook. That means first, actually, what we have to do, we have to import useFX. useFX from which library? React. Same like state, we have useFX. Actually, we write useFX like this. Means in a component, we write useFX. useFX actually uses a callback function. useFX uses a callback function, and this callback function will return some functionality, and it contains dependency, an array dependency, and it will contain the action like so actions on mount, and it will have a return. This return is going to define actions on. This return is going to define actions on unmount. Actions on unmount. That's how we define. This is the basic syntax of useFX. useFX uses a callback function. Remember, all callback functions you have to write in JSX in a shorthand way. You know arrow, na? Arrow functions. That means all should be in a shorthand way. You cannot write the word function. Right? All you have to use in a shorthand way. I showed you map. Right? In map also we are using all shorthand. Generally map uses a callback function. You cannot write callback function. JSX supports all arrow methods. That means all you have to use the arrow methods. I will explain this scenario, how it works. We will discuss about that. That means at the time of mounting component, what activity to perform, you write in which one? useFX. Now, actually, so the component once mounted, after mounting, what will happen is mounted means it is loaded. After loading, it will display some data inside. It will show some content inside. Now, remember, every component mounts only once. Every component mounts only once. Now, what happened is you made some changes. When you made some changes, the component have to mount again and update those changes and show me. That means usually component mounts how many times? Only once. But whenever any particular change happened, then you want the component to mount again. Then that you have to define in dependency. Dependency indicates when I have to mount again. That means the component is asking when I should mount again. If you leave it empty, That means you are saying that only once. If you put the dependency, if you put the dependency here, that means you put dependency. Dependency is nothing but you put some variable or some reference. Whenever that reference changes, it will mount again. That means you give a dependency. Whenever the dependency changes, it will mount again. For example, what I have done some roughly, suppose variable, some it is collection data is an array. In this array, we have A and we have B. That means now how many elements are there? 2 elements are there. Now what I am doing in the dependency, I will give data.length. Data.length. That means currently data is how much? 2. 2 is the length. That means now the component is loaded. The question is when it will load again. When it will load again, who is the dependency? Who is the dependency? Length is the dependency. Na? That means whenever the length changes, it will load again. That means, for example, you added one more item. Understood? That means now length changed. Na? When length changed, then automatically the mount will happen again. When mount happens again, the new value that you added will update. Otherwise, it will not update. You don't give the dependency. If you don't give the dependency, then what will happen? At the time of loading, how many are there? 2. It will display those 2. Later, you are adding 3, 4, 5. They will not update. They will not update. Your array may be changing, but it will not update because the new changes are not mounted again. Every change should mount again. That is what dependency is. That means usually a component mounts only once. If there is a condition for mounting again and again, what is that condition that you can define? Can there be more than one condition for mounting? Currently, I said data.length. Can there be more than one condition for mounting? Can there be more than one condition for mounting? Can there be more than one condition for mounting? You see clearly what is the dependency type? Dependency is an array. Na? It's an array, square brace. Na? It is an array. Array means there can be more than one. Array, na? It is array. That means what you can do? You can say data.length. Length. You can use some other dependency. You can use some other dependency. You can write any number of dependencies because it's an array type. That means any one of these changing, then automatically component will mount again. These all examples we will see. We will see how to handle all these examples without dependency, with the dependency, how they work. We will see. We will implement all this in one example. That means what is the concept of use effect? Dependency. What is the concept of use effect? It defines what are the activities to perform at the time of loading the component. At the time of loading component, you want some activities to perform. You can define those activities in which location. Use effects. Use effects. I will show you that point here. See, I will create a simple interface here to understand that concept. I will remove this one. I will add a new component. I will give a component name, new folder, say life cycle. Okay. I will add a new file, life cycle.jsx. I am just giving life cycle.jsx. In this C here, I am creating a component export function, the component name login. And what it will return? It will just return a heading. I will just give a heading. So user login. Just roughly keep this much. That's it. You create login screen or something, anything there. Okay, this is one. I am creating another export function. We have register and it will return. So a heading, and here we say register new user. Remember, all the components I am creating in one file. Actually, what we can do, you can create one component in one file, another component in another file. Here, two components are created in the same file. Okay, let's create another component. Export function. This component name is life cycle. Life cycle is the component name. What it should return? It should return a simple container, a heading. So mount demo. Some mount demo I am giving. And see what we are doing here. We will keep it in the startup. Which one should be in the startup? Life cycle must be in the startup. That means now life cycle is in the startup. Mount demo. I will just use here class container fluid. Okay. Mount demo is there. Fine. Now here observe, I'm giving two buttons. One button is login and another button is register. We have two buttons. One button is login and register. When I click login, that login component should come below. And when I click register, register component should come below. That means there are two components already, login and register. Those components should come below. Below, I will put a horizontal line. And so I will just keep here a simple container. Here I want to display. Now what we will do, we will write some use state constant. And I will give template, comma, set template. Set template is equal to use state. We are importing that use state. It is a string type. That means this is a string type. Okay. Now what we are doing, we are writing a function. The function is login click. On login click, what should happen is this login component should be used as template. That means what we will do, it is a string type now. Set template, which component? We will use login component. So that login component is used into it. It is sent into it. That means on login click, this login component related result will be stored inside the template. Now, similarly, we have another function. What is it? Register click. On register click, what should the template? It should set register template. Register template into it. Register component should be in the template. And where to display the template? The template should be displayed below now. Here we will render. What to render? Template. That template contains a component, a login component and a register. Now we have to write logic for this button on click. On click, what to do? Login click. Okay. For this button on click, what to do? Register click. These are the functions it should execute. Now see what happens now. I click on login, login will come. I click on register, register will come. User will stay on only one page, everything comes on that. This is what single page application nature is. You don't have several pages. Actually, I just designed a screen, means just heading I kept here. That means this login is a container div, right? It will contain that like username, and it will contain like input type is text like this, right? All these are basic things. That means you can see I click on login, it will get that user log. I click on register, you get on register. Now see what is happening is when I click on register, initially empty na. When I click on login, login component is going to mount. It is going to mount. and it is going to render below that line. And when you click register, what will happen? Login will unmount. After mounting, it will unmount. After unmounting, the next component will come. What is that next component? Register, whatever you registered. Let's write and see here. What I am writing here is in every component, this is login component. We are writing mount phase. How to write the mount phase? Use effect. Use effect is the mount phase. Here it uses a callback function and it have dependency. Currently dependencies are empty. Later I will tell you dependencies how to write. Currently dependency is empty. This is mount phase. Now here I will put an alert. In the alert I will put a message saying that login component will mount. That is the message I am giving. Now same I will write another mount phase in which component? Register. And here we will write which component will mount? Register component will mount. That means now see here, when I click login, at the time of mounting, automatically the alert comes. That means alert indicates the first phase. What is the first phase? Mount. It says that login component will mount. Now you say okay, then it is mounted here. You click on register. When I click on register, which component? Register component will mount. That means automatically login will unmount and register will mount. I click on OK. Now you can see register will mount. That means it is going to load that component. So what is mount? How to write mount phase? As of now in the mount phase, I written only alert. Later we will write lot of logic. Suppose we want to get data from an API, fetch data from backend and load the data, keep the data in the memory and later use it. All this is written in mount only. That means whatever activities you want to perform at the time of loading, generally it is same like you have in your JavaScript body onload. Body have an onload event. Na? What is that onload event? Onload event indicates what activities to perform at the time of loading the page. The same here we define by using which option? We define by using mount. By using mount. How unmount works? Let's see here. Generally, after writing the mount phase, here in this mount, this is mount and unmount both same. Here we use a return. Actually what return can do? So return can return any unmount. Actually return is simple. Return is a simple logic to define here. That means actually what return will do? Return will return markup. It can return markup or it can return a function. What is that? We will put an alert. What is the alert? Alert is simply saying that login component will what? Unmount. Like this we need to configure. But remember this return is generally what is the meaning of return keyword? Return is a jump statement. Jump statement. Return indicates that. What does return indicates? Return indicates that the termination will happen here. That means it will stop the compiling and it will terminate the compiling. That means whenever you use the return keyword, that means generally how we use some functionality to perform. Whatever you return after the return keyword, it is not going to execute. That is the basic thing everybody knows. That then how we define unmount phase? How you configure the unmount phase? That means return is not going to return anything. That means if you use the return, it will be unmount. So how do you write the unmount phase? For that, we will learn one technique. Actually, for that, you need to understand a concept called routing. I will show you that routing. In routing, what we do? We switch from one component to another. Here, everything I written in one file. Na? Then when you move from one file to another file, you can handle that, right? That later I will show you that. For that, we will design one example also, how to configure. But how to write unmount phase? Unmount phase always defined by using what? Return. That means return indicates what to return. We want to return something alert, some message. That means component. So which one, what it will happen? Unmount. Like this we configure. Later you are going to understand that unmount phase, how it works. Usually just I return that return option. But you see now, you see when I refresh this here, the component login component will mount. After component mount, you see component will unmount. Actually, when you request, it is going to unmount. You see when you click request register, what will happen now? Register component will mount, but already login is mounted now. What will happen first? Login will unmount and register will mount. That means you click on register component will mount. When register component is mounting, the login will unmount. Internally, that activity will be performed. This you will see completely in lifecycle concept, right? As of now, you don't need to understand or write this one. You need to just use only mount. Unmount phases you will see later. Once you know this, that means now we know how to write the activities to perform at the time of loading the component. Now you can write the logic for interacting with APIs. That means what we will do, we will see how to write the logic to get the data from an API, load the data and give the data to the component. For that you need which phase? We need a mount phase, because here you cannot write here, you cannot write like onload. You cannot write like onload. Then load is defined by using which option? Load is defined by using use effect. This is what we need to configure. So this we will implement in an example. We will see how to implement in an example. Roughly, I will give one small example here. Lifecycle.what? JSX. In lifecycle JSX, let me copy this code, and this is the code. That's what we have to do. So now you are aware of all the basic points, right? What are the basic points? So how data binding works, how style binding works, how class binding works, how event binding works, and how the load is defined. Load means nothing but mount. How the mount is defined. Now you are ready to design some examples. We are ready to design some examples. So what we will do, we will take an example of sample data. We will learn how to consume the data and work with the data. We will see different examples. So I will show you first working with some free APIs. After that, we will create our own APIs and we will learn how to work with our own APIs. Because to learn with your own APIs, you need some backend knowledge. Means you need to learn some backend technologies like databases and server side technologies. You need to understand to create your own APIs. I will give an overview to MongoDB and Node.js so that we can create our own APIs. Right, then we can use those APIs in designing an example. First, we will see some sample APIs. We will understand what is API, how to use the APIs, work with the APIs. That we will see with one real-time example. That will start in next session. Tomorrow we'll do that. Right, now in tomorrow's session, we are going to build one application. With whatever we learned up to now, we are going to build one application so that everything will get clear. That means we will get a clarity where to implement all these one, right? Tomorrow we'll see that. Okay, right.